where the blocks are.
Where did the road go then?
Where did the road go is the question. That's right.
I know there were also people who said, "Oh, we figured out how they built the pyramids. We built this little one, and
Yep.
we just scale those methods up, and there you go." And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Go build us something the size of the Great Pyramid with those blocks and that precision, and then I'll be convinced you figured it out.
Yeah. And then they don't tell you that they ended up using heavy machinery and steel tools and
Right.
Yeah.
Or they do, but you have to dig a little deeper to find that out.
Right. Yeah.
Because I mean, the thing that you hear is that even with our ability to build things today, we couldn't build the Great Pyramid.
Yep. That's
Yeah.
right. All right, I did some digging and I did not find anything
Did
about
some watching.
Yeah, I was trying to find if like stone. It's kind of hard to search for this, but ancient stone constructions with
magnetic alignments.
Magnetic alignments in the stone.
Yeah.
Didn't find it. So I don't know where I heard that. But the only thing I found was one reference to it on the Human Origin Project, where they state, for example, certain stone circles may be aligned with the magnetic qualities of the stones. In some cases, the stones are laid out. They each point magnetically to the next stone in the circle. But of course, they don't tell you where.
I think that's
this
Avebury.
is. Avebury, okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know that for sure, but it doesn't seem implausible to me that may have been a technique, right? Like just because of so many of the other and insanely meticulous techniques that they use to lay some of these stone sites.
And it may be possible to figure out magnetic stuff without any special equipment. Have we ever told you the magnet experiment that Kyle did on me?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay.
I bought I don't know how to pronounce it, but the neodymium magnet.
Right?
Okay.
They're really strong rare earth magnets.
I bought it's about a 1/2-inch bar magnet, but I had 3 of them, so it made about a 3-inch magnetic bar. And then I have an actual 1/2-inch steel bar. When you close your eyes, their sizes and the weights are basically the same when you're holding one in one hand and one in the other. But I was holding them and I'm like, this magnet feels different, right?
Huh.
Why does this magnet seem to feel different? Not in a strange way. And I'm just like, it's probably just because I know it's a magnet. And I'm just making this up. So I used Russ to run this experiment, and he shows up down here. We're about to start the podcast or something, and I'm like, all right, hold your hands apart.
Close your eyes.
Close your eyes. Hold your hands apart. And I'm gonna put something in your hands. And
that takes trust, buddy.
Yeah, he closes his eyes. He holds his hands apart, and he opens them up, and I put these 2 steel, the magnetic and the steel bar in one hand, and the magnetic one in the other, and he's like sitting there with his eyes closed, and I'm like, so what do you think? And he's just like moving them around, and then he's like, this one feels weird. And it's the magnet. Yeah, I was like, yes. Okay.
So without any practice, right? It seems like, so you can imagine maybe ancient people could cultivate, if this is really a thing, could people possibly cultivate the ability to detect magnetic fields, without any tools at all?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are, examples in nature, like certain birds. I can't remember what the cells are called.
Oh man!
Anne told us what they were.
Yeah,
I don't remember. She wrote us an email about this because we were talking. Anyway, they have some kind of chemical in their brain that
detects magnetic fields, and
so they can follow magnetic field lines, right?
Louis Proud wrote a book called Strange Electromagnetic Dimensions that talks about stuff like that.
Yeah, I imagine that most migrating creatures must have something like this.
Yeah, yeah.
And humans, we don't really migrate, but I mean, we've all met people who seem to have a compass in their head. They always know which direction they're facing.
Right.
You can ask them and they're like, yeah, north is over there. I mean, they just know. And other people don't. Like I don't have this. Like my compass in my head is not there. So I get lost all the time. But some people do have it. So I think it's stronger in other people, and there's something going on there. So possibly it's possible to cultivate this kind of thing. And detecting the Earth's magnetic field or detecting magnetic fields of objects.
and then you have dowsing, which seems
Yes.
to interact with that, whether it's because the person is unconsciously picking up on the information, or there's something about those rods, using certain types of rods or trees that react to this stuff.
Yeah.
I suspect
Cryptochrome.
it's the former.
Right. Yeah.
Cryptochrome is the name of the chemical.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great name.
Yeah. It's a good band name.
Yeah, it's a good band name.
But I mean, and I was surprised when they were doing something in my yard. I forget what it was. I think it was when my back basement kept flooding, and they were trying to figure out where it drained to. And this guy just picks up a stick and starts dowsing, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
"Huh, I didn't expect that."
You want to come on the podcast?
He wasn't successful, so
Okay. All right.
But
Okay, well, we have another story. Did we ever tell you Russ's dowsing story?
I don't know.
He's always been fascinated by the dowsing thing, and we at work we were having to dig up. We're going to be running this big electrical line, and we needed to know where the water lines or the electric lines or whatever that were going across this area before we dug a trench, right? And Russ is like, well, we hired these guys. They were coming out with an instrument, and they were going to run it all through the yard and find and mark all the paths of these pipes and electric lines. And Russ was like, hey, man, this is my chance, right?
Yeah. I'm like, this is my chance to test this. Because they're going to come out with actual equipment to find them, so I can go out here and douse it, and then I'll mark what I find with dowsing, and I'll see if I'm right.
So he makes himself some dowsing rods, and he's out there, and I'm in the shop like working or whatever. He finally comes back in, and he's like, I don't know, man, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's the deal? He's like, I didn't find anything. And I'm like, really? He's like, nothing. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. So then the guys come out with the instrument, and they start running around in the yard, and there's nothing. And they end up finding out that the lines are in a completely different area that we did not expect. So I was like, dude, you succeeded.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no false positive. It was like,
Yeah.
you didn't find anything because there was nothing there.
That reminds me of the one time I felt like I actually projected out of body. Like I was conscious, and I was like, can I do this? And I found myself up at that cliff where I've had weird things happen. And I said, but how do I know I'm here? How do I know I'm just not imagining it? And I'm like, wait, my friend wrote something on the tree the last time we were here, and I don't know what it was. I'm going to go look at the tree. And so I float over to the tree, and there's nothing on the tree. And I'm like, okay, this is just my imagination. And so like later I'm talking to him. I'm like, by the way, what did you write on the tree the other day? He's like, what? Oh, I couldn't think of anything, so I didn't write anything. And I'm like, damn it, now I don't know if I was there or not.
Yeah.
Well, we just consider that proof.
That's
that
right.
You were actually
That
there.
is actual evidence that you were there.
Or at least picked up on the information.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
I think
it's
so
just
much of
interesting,
this-
right? You thought you expected there to be something on the tree, and there
Right.
wasn't. So could it have been? I mean, is that your imagination?
Right. It's hard to say. Well, I'm saying information, like it may not have actually been out of body, but was able to pick up the information from that area. Like, I think so much of this stuff is information based,
Yeah.
So like when you're dowsing, maybe it is that you're unconsciously picking up something, but maybe that stuff is literally just information.
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
Well,
I was going to say, do we take this back to Cremo? Or
yeah. So one of the things I remember in the book was a modern human being found under like this piece of very solid rock that they had absolutely no doubts had to be there like however many millions of years. Is that part in the one you read?
Yeah, well, okay. So these kinds of discoveries are always debated, and somebody doesn't believe them, right? But like the finds in, for example, the Tabletop Mountain gold mines were very interesting, and in a lot of cases they would find artifacts plus the bones, and in one case it was like the bones plus the artifacts plus like lying on the ground, what used to be like what they call a paleosurface, right? So it's a very ancient ground surface that is now basically underneath a mountain, but the mountain is really a butte. It's a large sediment deposit that's later been eroded away into a butte, like a mesa.
Okay.
Yeah, so they find there's like a petrified tree and bones and all these spear points on what used to be the ground surface underneath this mesa where they were mining for gold.
But the thing is that there's no one's disputing the idea that this was once the ground surface.
Right.
So they're actually digging through river gravels and finding gold nuggets that used to be in the bottom of this river.
Yeah.
But now the ancient riverbed has a mountain on top of it, basically.
Yeah.
This butte. So it's, as an artifact hunter, where are you going to look for artifacts in or around water?
Right.
Stone
Or where
artifacts.
there was water. Yeah.
Yeah, where there was water. So dry creek beds, live creek beds, whatever you can. That's where you go. That's where they were, and so it's not, that's totally what you would expect to find if there were humans around at that time. That's what's disputed. Is it like, okay, that this basically this butte or this mountain that's on top of this ancient river is indicative that the river itself is extremely old, but maybe not because of cataclysms, right?
To get the mesa, you have to deposit enormous amounts of sediment over the entire landscape.
And then you have to erode
And
it
then
away.
you have to put a bunch of water all around that area to erode it away to leave a mesa in that spot.
Right.
And then the gold rush people were digging into the side. They went down into a gully or a gorge at the side of the mesa and were digging in to the side of the mesa and going down and basically following what was the ancient surface before that mesa was there, because there's an old riverbed there and a bunch of river gravel. It's all cemented together at this point. It's like hard as rock. It's basically silts and river cobbles that have been turned into a kind of cement. So it isn't like digging through sand. It's very it's very cemented. And then they're finding gold nuggets in that because this ancient river had a gold source somewhere. But they also started finding artifacts because this did used to be a surface. So the question becomes, and the idea is this is tertiary period material. So that puts it at anywhere between 10 to 30 million to 50 million years old, depending on where it was. So not only, so again, we got multiple strikes against it. Like this is in the Americas, which it can't be that old. They're anatomically modern bones and very advanced tools. They don't like that for even in Europe. If you found something that old, it would be, that would be bad. And then the fact that it's so ancient due to the age that they think that strata is, that it puts it outside of the scope of human evolution entirely, or it basically puts modern humans back all the way back before what they think of as, Homo erectus, like way before them.
Right. And it's possible that you could have had an anatomically modern human at the same time as Homo erectus.
Yeah, but the standard model does not accept that. But
right.
yes,
yeah.
I completely agree. Yeah. And the question is like, so it's interesting to see the difference in what we know about the science now and what not the science, but what the accepted concepts are now that, for example, Neanderthals were not so much a precursor to Homo sapiens sapiens, but we're actually like a brother species. We lived alongside them as opposed to them being our ancestors. In other words, that Neanderthals lived with Homo sapiens sapiens, not that Homo sapiens sapiens arose from Neanderthals, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's a big difference. And now we have like the Denisovans that were also, no one knows what they look like. We haven't found any remains of them yet, but they do exist in our genetics, and they also seem to be another brother species to Homo sapiens sapiens and the Neanderthals. And the human species, the Homo sape have been pushed back to 200 to 300,000 years old.
Yeah.
Whereas when they were writing this book in the late 80s, 100,000 years old is what they thought. And at the advent of modern humans in Europe was 30,000 years ago. Well, we've got caves with paintings in them now that are 40,000 years old in Europe. So that's been pushed back.
Yep.
So lots of these Graham Hancock is always saying, things keep getting older.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what what becomes apparent as you go through the book is that it's very similar to I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Clovis first thing. I mean, Graham talks about this a lot, right? They dig down, they find Clovis, they stop digging in the Americas because you've now found the first people.
Yeah.
Right.
No point digging deeper because there was nobody there.
Don't dig any deeper. So now that's out. So now people are digging deeper. And of course they're finding artifacts because Clovis was not first.
Yeah.
And that's now accepted. He was controversial for a long time.
Well, even the Clovis stuff was controversial for a long time.
Yeah, if you go back far enough, the advent of humans into the Americas was thought to be only 5,000 years ago.
Right.
Clovis was then 12, 10 to 12, and then they had to push it back to 15, and then they pushed it back a little bit more to 17, and now it's like, all right, there were people here before Clovis at 22 and 30.
Yeah, so what you see happening through as like time develops from like the late 1800s through the early 1900s, and then after the pretty much, the new accepted model of human development and evolution is the reverse of the Clovis first thing. Before that, they were digging in all these places and accepting and debating certain finds of Homo sapiens sapien bones, anatomically modern human bones. And then once they accepted this other story, those finds were then thrown out, and nobody's digging or looking for human bones in any of these places. And that's not even happening anymore.
Yeah.
Right. You're not going to have an archaeologist come and dig through something that's 300 million years old.
Yeah. Because they're not going to find anything.
No.
That only be a paleontologist, and if he found a human bone, he would probably hide it or something.
Or just it must have cracked. The surface cracked, and it came out, and then they just don't even put it in the literature. So
right, yeah.
Yeah, there's one guy when we were going through the artifact section, basically, because they separate the book into sections. Like first they go through, all right, like their findings, we're looking at cut bones.
Yeah.
And this is still, I mean, it's hotly debated even today, like what constitute butchering marks on a bone as opposed to geological scrapes and scratches.
Right.
Graham
talks a lot about that too in his latest book.
Who does? Sorry,
Graham.
Oh, Graham does. Yeah. And it's, it's like we're nerding out on this on our show, and I'm like, how interesting is this to people? Because we're just like, oh man, look at these scratches on this bone. It's like, is this really interesting to people? Yeah, it is, because it's telling us about our origins, possibly.
Yeah.
And so, and then the next section after that, after the bones section, animal bones section, and butchering section it moves to stone tools, and they separate it into what they call eoliths, paleoliths, and neoliths, which are just simple terms that mean an eolith is like a very rudimentary tool where you basically find a flint chip or maybe a piece of granite that's shaped already correctly for what you want to do, which is like bang on something and cut it maybe.
Right.
Maybe you make a few modifications, but basically it's like you pick it up and you're like, this rock is already the right shape for me to do what I want to do with it.
So the rock shows work.
Yeah.
And the work is not working on the rock, but the work that you're doing with it.
Yeah.
So if you were cutting a bone with it, it's going to have an abrade, the edge is going to be abraded.
Yeah.
Basically.
Like you can look at it with just a magnifying glass and see that somebody has used this as a tool. Because just one edge, the sharp side has microscopic, not microscopic, but damage that requires close scrutiny, but not a microscope to see. And then the next set is paleoliths, where they have picked up chips and they've actually started to modified them. They're napping them into what we would think of as spear points or scrapers. And then the neoliths are the really advanced points that everybody thinks of when they think of an arrowhead. The really beautiful pieces.
Right.
It's a bifacial. They've worked every part of the surface of the tool.
Yeah, made it real thin and just beautiful. And so, when they're finding, so you've got these finds where they're finding something like paleoliths, say unifacials, where it's just been the tool has only been worked on one side to make it a little sharper. And there are all these, it goes back and forth with these scientists who are saying, well, it's because it's in that ancient strata, that must have been the result of geological chipping.
Right.
And then of course the authors take pains to point out, if this had been found in acceptable timescales in terms of the strata, no one would question that it's a human tool.
Right.
But because because it's found too deep or in a place where it can't be there, or it's underneath this layer of lava, which we know is too ancient for people who have been in this particular spot, or it isn't necessarily that there weren't people around yet, but it's too advanced for what we think people were doing at that time, it must be geological chipping, even though it looks like a human artifact.
Yeah, and a great example of that is a fossilized shoe. A piece of like a fossilized shoe sole.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, it's a solid piece of rock, but it looks like the heel of a shoe sole. And they're like,
not a footprint, but the sole
of an actual shoe, and it's got the stitching going around the edge of it.
And it was discovered by a geologist, so it's not like a
yes.
Yeah.
And they're like, man, this is just a really good natural representation of what looks like a shoe, but it's totally natural, And so then they get a lens out and they look at the stitching closer, and the rock, the lithified stitch thread itself, you can see the twists in the thread where the thread was actually manufactured. Like it's got the same twisting all the way around.
Oh wow.
And it's like, yeah, this is a really good natural representation of what a shoe looks like, down to the twisting of the thread.
Yeah. Yep. They were saying it was the most astounding natural artifact that looks like a manufactured artifact ever found.
And of course, go ahead.
I just this kind of stuff. You're like, okay, I don't know. This is. For me, I already am kind of just like open to the possibility that we've got all these, the timeline wrong and all this kind of stuff. But just some of the stuff, like that shoe being found somewhere way down deep in something, and it's completely turned to stone.
Yeah,
it's just mind-boggling to me. I'm just like, how do we just maybe we don't understand the processes, all of the possible processes of fossilization or lithification. I don't know. It's
right.
Just,
yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, we make a lot of assumptions about this stuff. About how coal is formed or how oil is formed. And I know there's some debate as to how oil is actually formed.
Yep, that's right. Can it form abiotically? Is a question. Yeah. And most geologists will tell you absolutely not, right? I mean, but there is a debate, but it's the people who think there's a possibility for abiotic production of hydrocarbons, they're on what would be considered the fringes.
Right.
Coal freaks me out because
at least in the Western world.
I think of like, you take the Amazon rainforest and you set the entire thing on fire, and then you lay down an entire chunk of crust on top of it, and then it's being compressed while it's on fire, and that's what turns it into coal.
Yeah.
Just like, how does that even happen?
Yeah.
To begin with, because they're just gigantic masses of organic materials that are basically that were burning when they were buried.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's
And so it just
from a cataclysmic viewpoint, that makes more sense.
Yeah. Yep. But you'll see geological arguments that say, well, because I mean, the way people make charcoal today, if you want to make it, that's what you do. You get a bunch of wood, and you split it up into specifically sized pieces. You set them on fire very carefully so that they're kind of all burning evenly, and then you cover them in mud and you wait.
I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
Yeah. You wait a while, and then eventually you remove all the mud, and it's, very wet. Like think clay, like very wet clay. You completely make a dome over the fire with clay, and you wait. And then you take the clay apart, and the wood has sort of slowly oven cooked inside this thing. And when you take it apart, it breaks into these perfect little cubic pieces that are charcoal that are now very dry and are ready to burn with much more heat than you could get from normal wood, because you've gotten rid of all the moisture and, but there's still burnable material in there.
Huh.
So one way to make charcoal is to one way to make big layers of coal is to take a lot of biomass, set it all on fire, and then bury it in mud. But you'll see geological arguments that say, well, you can replicate that process over millions and millions and millions of years by just slowly burying biomass under increasing amounts of sediment, and the pressure is what.
Yes.
Right. but it is possible. It's
like a mummification of a lot of biomass.
It's the pressure generates the heat, and then you dry it. But it's possible that large cataclysmic events, if they've happened multiple times, can generate coal very quickly and also bury it under enormous amounts of material, in a geological instant, in a matter of months or less.
And then you have like the going into the Fortiana range. How many times Charles Fort pointed out frogs being found in coal veins.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And in the book, there's quite a few interesting cases of golden chains, like an iron cup, I think, was found. Like the block thing that I mentioned, a section of stone tile that was engraved with a diamond pattern that had a bunch of faces, all the same faces in there, like a face of an old man, all looking in the same direction.
Huh.
All found in coal.
Yeah.
And then lots of quarries, where they're quarrying. Like one of the most interesting ones to me when we were in the artifacts section was a story, and this was published in a respectable, I can't remember what it was, as a Journal of Natural Science or something like that, but it was a 1800s, so no one will accept this today. But
right,
quarrymen were working in a particular quarry, and I think it might have been France, I don't remember. They were rebuilding some building, the Palace of Justice, I think is what they said it was. I don't know where that is, but they were quarrying material out of a limestone quarry, and the quarry was basically set up where there would be a large, thick layer of limestone, and they would get through all of that, and then below that there would be a layer of sand or pebbles, or aggregate, and then below that would be more limestone, and they would dig through several feet of that, sometimes up to 10 feet of it, and they had gone down 10 of those levels of the limestone and sand. And then the bottom of that 11th layer of limestone, the very bottom of it, all the limestone had shells and marine incrustations stuck to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then below that was more sand. And in the sand, before they got to the next layer of limestone down, but in the sand, they found quarry tools and remnants of pieces of columns that had been being quarried by whoever a long time ago, and then it was presumably buried under multiple layers of limestone. One of the one just above it, which had marine incrustations on it.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, and they said that the quarry tools, many of which they were like typical quarry tools, wooden, hammers and other things with handles and working parts of wood, and quarry boards, all of which had been turned into agate, basically petrified and turned into like a jewel.
Huh.
Yeah. And it was like, okay, so what can explain that? Either you say that someone was using human style tools so far back that 11 layers of limestone were able to build up on top of it after they were doing this work.
Yeah.
Or this is a cataclysm of some kind, or multiple ones, and it isn't that far back. I just don't know. I mean, it could be it could be both. I have no idea. But the whole book is fascinating, and it just makes you think. What's wrong here? What's wrong with our story?
Yeah, a lot, I think.
Yeah,
and and that bias toward we already know the answers is part of the problem.
You tell me how the electric universe makes 11 limestone layers, man.
Have you heard of the electric universe?
Have you ever heard of this theory?
But that's kind of the thing. Even a cataclysm, what's going to form 11 limestone layers?
I know that's and the standard. If I remember correctly, because we live on limestone bedrock, and there are solid sections, and then it gets like gravelly and very brittle and sometimes sandy and clay, and then there's another solid section.
Yeah.
And I think that the explanation is that this is different levels of the sea, right? The shallow seas would rise, and when the waters were deeper, the limestone would be more tightly packed, and it would actually create like the solid limestone. And then the seas would recede, and then you have the more hackly sort of grainy stuff that's not very well cemented together, and then they would get deep again, and it's like back and forth and back and forth. So you have these layers built up over eons, you know.
Yeah, and possibly like the inclusion of say volcanic ash,
Right.
Yeah.
into particular parts of the deposition makes it cement together much better into stone versus others, and So
it's hard to imagine how this process could be done quickly for 11 layers.
Yeah.
Of thick limestone. I just don't. I mean, yeah. But then again, excuse me, it's kind of like the missing 411 stuff. You know, where are these artifacts? Well, they're gone. You know, we can't inspect them, so you have to take them for their word.
The site's gone, the artifacts are gone, and all we have are the reports.
Well, and I mean that's kind of what happens when you look at the discovery of giants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly some of them were probably newspapers, just trying to bring in viewers, but there's plenty of stuff that's even listed in the Smithsonian that you can't look at.
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
And
so some of them, some of the accounts in the book, I don't know what to do with it. I'm just like, well, and then other ones where they're very well documented and they're being heavily debated amongst well-respected scientists of the time, and there's a lot of evidence put forth, and the data, those I'm like, wow, this is very convincing.
Yeah,
and it does seem like it was just thrown out because it didn't fit.
Right.
Like in some cases, it's even so much as first the discovery is made, and it's made by a competent scientist who's well respected by his peers in that day, and then he brings out a couple of people to come look. And then they bring the evidence to, like, for example, a conference or a meeting of like the of a bunch of scientists or anthropologists or whatever looking at these kinds of things, and they show the evidence that they've found to these guys, and then they're intrigued, but they're not quite buying it, but they're intrigued, and then they form like a group of them, and they go back out to the site and they do more digging in a different spot, and they find more artifacts. And so it's very well documented, and nevertheless, it leaves the scientific literature over time because it doesn't fit the model that's being built.
Right. And I mean, that's I think a human thing. It's not just scientists that do that. Everyone kind of does that.
Oh, of course, right. Yeah, we can't say that it's just like, can't lay the blame on this just as scientists. You're right. It's absolutely human nature. But I think that science is kind of held up as something that is supposed to be a system that keeps people from doing that.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And it should be.
It's like a whole follow the data thing.
Yeah.
And science is a system that allows us to change our ideas if we find evidence that says our ideas are wrong. And yet we have example after example where that's not happening.
You have Darrell Bem's work in Cornell, where he's the one that showed that people responded to random images before the computer even picked the images.
Oh yeah,
and it was peer reviewed, it was replicated, and the response was kind of like, well, according to the standards we've set for this stuff over all these years that seem to work, he's showing this precognition. We know that doesn't exist, so maybe we need to re-examine our methodology.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's they can't accept it based on theoretical preconsiderations, and so they throw out evidence which in any other situation would be considered solid.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's
so. Yeah, I think.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna. I think the good news is that it seems like there's a growing number of people that are like scientists in the fields of archaeology or paleontology or geology that are taking a look at these things again. Not necessarily specifically the cases in this book, but there are a lot of questions like the fact that the Clovis First thing has finally been toppled is now changing a lot of the way people look at stuff, and there are accredited geologists looking deeply into a lot of the stuff that Randall is studying and asking these questions, the same questions that Randall's been asking for 30 years. So there is progress in that
Yeah.
aspect. So I think that's good. And you're right. You make a really good point that a lot of this is just human nature. Pointing the finger at scientists is not the right thing to do. It's just science is supposed to be a process that is set up to keep the human nature out of it.
Right.
But there's no way to make that perfect.
Nope.
So yeah, it's a difficult thing.
And then you look at like all the issues Robert Schoch had when, he dated the Sphinx geologically, and not a single geologist disagreed with him, but the Egyptologists didn't change their data.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like,
and even geologists knew once they realized what they were looking at, they're like, ooh.
Yeah.
Don't know if I want to put my name on that.
Yeah.
But that none of them actually, none of them dissented against Robert. I mean, they didn't say he was wrong.
They're right.
They didn't.
The geological work seemed to be sound. More could be done, but it isn't. It's very dangerous.
So, it's dangerous because it rewrites, archaeology.
Right. Well, what I mean is it's dangerous for a geologist personally to engage in that work because it would ruin his career, possibly.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Robert was actually brave enough to put his name on the line.
Only after he had tenure.
Sure.
Which was good.
Which was a smart move.
Yeah.
You cannot blame him for that.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Because didn't they try to revoke? No, it wasn't him that they tried to revoke.
John Mack.
John Max, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we talked about that in our last episode. Yeah, but we got some questions for people like, how would you fix this problem? If you were king of the world and you can't change human nature, is there a way where we can fix this issue? I don't think there is.
Yeah.
Well, part of the problem is the scientific process is so driven by grants. Like it's not, the money isn't just there.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to kind of play ball in order to get the money to do the things that you really want to do. And sometimes you have to kind of, you can maybe put that stuff out there, but you can't draw too much attention to it. And then, slowly over time, people are like, hey, why did nobody talk about this?
Yeah, and this is why it's a good thing that people of other backgrounds get involved.
Yeah.
Right? Because we all have skin in the game. Right? And so people like Graham Hancock, he gets involved in these ideas. He writes about it. He's a writer. But then you have the problem of the accusation of pseudoscience, right? He was never claiming to do science.
Right.
He was claiming to be a journalist.
Yeah, and asking questions.
That's not doing science. That's just being a curious person and a good writer. And but they use that, and that I don't know, that's just a sort of a pet peeve, I guess, because I think that it's good that people like Michael Cremo or Graham Hancock get involved in these situations and write about them, categorize them, document them in a way that is presentable to the public, so that we can all ask the questions, right?
Yeah.
And it hopefully generates a new
interest and
a new set of scientists.
Exactly.
Like, for example, like you brought up last night, Mark Young, who was like, I started looking at Graham Hancock and then I got interested in Randall stuff. And now he's in school for archaeology and geology. And he's there because of those interests, And he's following the dream. He's like, I love these ideas. I'm interested in these ideas. And I'm going to go to school and get credentialed so I can look at these ideas from a professional standpoint.
Right. And hopefully not get blackballed out of the, profession.
Right. Yeah.
And the other problem, I think, too, is that you have, you have people who are who only study one thing. And this is across the board.
Yes.
I mean, everyone's a specialist, but very few people are multidisciplinary.
That's right. Compartmentalization of knowledge.
Yeah. And whereas that's great that some people are experts, that's very useful. It's also useful to have a wider view of it. I remember in one of the Lost City series from David Hatcher Childress, he's talking about being in South America and how, if he didn't know where he was, he would maybe think he was in China looking at some of these artifacts. And he said something to the woman who went, well, I don't study that stuff. I wouldn't even look at that stuff. That's not my field. And, he's like, but maybe it should be because there's a similarity here that you can't ignore.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we need great specialists and great generalists.
Yeah.
Both looking at it. So you got the bigger picture and the macro and the micro.
Yeah.
So we're out of time.
Oh.
Time flies in the cube.
That's right.
So we're going to do a Patreon segment, but where can people find your wonderful podcast?
Well, on the moon.
Are we arranging to send a piece of it to the moon? brothersoftheserpent.com is where you can find all the podcast related stuff. And of course, the podcast as an RSS feed is available anywhere podcasts can be found, like Apple Podcasts and on Spotify and everything like that. Brothers of the Serpent.
So that's your wonderful podcast. Where can people find the podcasts you don't want them hearing? The really bad ones.
The terrible podcast.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have a terrible podcast, but we do have another one we do with Randall Carlson.
Oh, that's true. That's also a wonderful podcast, though.
Yeah, so if anybody is interested in Randall's work and hearing Kyle and I be very dumb while listening to Randall, it's hard to sound smart when you're dealing with that guy. You can look up Cosmographia. That's Cosmographia with a K, and you can find everything about that at randallcarlson.com.
But really, the terrible podcast is you can look up Brothers of the Serpent Archive, which is all the oldest episodes in the RSS feed, and that's the terrible podcast.
So on our website, we do have the archive section, and I built basically a static feed that has all the old shows in it. So that's where the terrible version of the podcast is. The first 50 episodes where we swore every other word, and you know how it is. So.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having us, man.
And I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. Seriously, you people are the life.